Scripture lesson this morning comes from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning in the 5th verse, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 5. Who then is Apollos, and who then is Paul? Servants through whom you came to believe, and as thus the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and each will receive wages according to the labor of each. For we are all God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. According to the grace given me, like a skilled master builder, I have laid a foundation, and someone else is building on it. Each builder must choose with care how to build on it, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one that has been laid, and that foundation is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, the work of each builder will become visible, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each has done. If what has been built on the foundation survives, the builder will receive an award. If the work is burned up, the builder will suffer loss. The builder will be saved, but only as through fire. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells within you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. So I've asked the children, and obviously if some of the children have seen the Lego movie, then at least some of you adults. So how many of you have seen the Lego movie out there? Handful? Now, there got to be more parents than that. So just a handful of us. So the Lego movie has been the highest grossing movie in the country the past few weeks. And for those of us who have had children who love Legos, it was kind of must-see movie going. Now, I will tell you, Shannon and I, this is a movie review, but Shannon and I mean, it was built up and everybody, oh, this is awesome. It was cute, it was fun, not our favorite animated movie we've seen, but there were some fascinating parts about the Lego movie. One was that the directors were very careful to make sure that in the Lego movie that things happened in Lego world only as they could in the real world. For example, if you have children or grandchildren who love Legos, they have these little Lego people, and their legs only go back and forth, and their heads can only twist this way, and they can only bend kind of at their middle and their torso up and down. They can't go side to side. So the directors and the creative team went to meticulous lengths to make sure that was the only way they could move. So, for example, in one scene, the Lego man was going to do some jumping jacks. Well, a Lego person's legs can't go in and out, so their jumping jacks were kind of like this. And that was the best they can do. But one of the big concepts behind Legos, I don't know if you realize this, but you can get an MBA in Legos. You can go to the Master Builders Academy. And you can learn, as I was telling the children, how to build with Legos. You can learn how to meticulously follow the instructions and directions and build the kits. And then you can also figure out how to take Legos and build from scratch creations that you come up with in your mind. Shannon and I have been fascinated over time as Zach will sit down. It's fun to watch him. The challenge with these things is these days, if you hadn't purchased a Lego set in a while, there's sticker shock to that. And the biggest frustration for parents is that if they get 3 or 4 Lego sets on Christmas morning, by the next day, they're all built and assembled and sitting there, and then what do you do with them? Some of them are like things that you can play with. They're vehicles and the people and that kind of stuff, but some of them just kind of sit there. And then over time, they collect enough Legos that they will build things on their own. Now, the Master Builders Academy does several things. One is it just helps children and anyone who loves Legos to be more creative. But there are keys to building with Legos. One of the biggest keys to building with Legos is learning how to interlock Legos so that whatever you build is able to hold together well, that it's able to be structurally sound. Okay, you're like, well, preacher, what does all this have to do with Paul writing to the church in Corinth? Well, Paul is talking about, this is the first letter to the Corinthians, and if you've done any Bible study at all, then you'll know that as Paul is writing Corinthians, he's writing them because the Corinthians just are having a hard time understanding this church stuff. And if you've never studied the Bible at all, I'll tell you that the Corinthians are not unlike the church today, and that sometimes they got it really right. Sometimes the Corinthians really got it, and other times they were completely off base as to what Christ had called the church to be and what Paul was trying to lead the church to do. So Paul is trying to lead them. And what's happening is they're arguing about which leaders they should follow. So Paul had started planting these churches and growing these churches throughout the region. And then others would have to come along and lead those churches. And then people felt as though they had to have allegiance to one leader or the other. And so what Paul begins to do is he tries to help them understand that each leader has a specific purpose, that each of us has a specific gift that we need to be engaged in the kingdom. One of my favorite, and you've heard, those that come regularly have heard me preach on, is when he begins to talk about the metaphor of the church as the body, and that each of us are parts of the body, and that you got to have all the body parts for it to all work together. But in this scripture we've read this morning, he's using two different metaphors. He's using that as of a field of planting, of a harvest or growing something, and he also uses that of a building. And he talks about the foundation. And so those that know me and know that I've studied building construction, and so I have a particular appreciation for that metaphor. Over the past few weeks, in fact, my neighbors across the street began a construction project, and they delivered the materials precisely the Friday before our first snowstorm. They were ready to go, and they're building a beautiful new porch. And it makes perfect sense. You build it kind of January, February, so that when those beautiful days in March and April come, you've got this beautiful new space to share. And I tell you, as an aside, it's nice to see people building porches on the front of their homes. You know, our country has gone through a cultural shift over times. Everyone used to have a front porch and rocking chairs on their front porch. And then when we kind of left the city center and we built all these suburban neighborhoods, we took the porches off the front of our houses and we fenced in our backyards and we put decks on the back. And so instead of all of us being out on the street together and seeing each other walk by and ride our bikes by, we all kind of hung out in our backyards in our own screened-in porches and our own decks. And maybe our friends would come over, but I love to see this movement back toward the front porch, toward us all being together around the street and seeing our children playing and growing up together. But in between the snow and the ice, they began the process of building the porch. First thing they had to do was to take down the old stuff that was there, and then they had to pour the concrete. Now, I've told you before, I love concrete, and I love watching concrete being poured. I know, it's just kind of a geeky thing. They're rebuilding E. Rivers Elementary and down by Peachtree Battle, and we were driving past there yesterday, and they have a huge concrete pump truck that is pouring some of the new walls for the basement of the new E. Rivers Elementary, and that is just, they had like 5 concrete tracks backed up, and I didn't think Shannon and Zach would sit there with me very long, but I kind of watched as we drove by. But foundations are so incredibly critical. Now in the South, we're pretty fortunate that our frost line is not very deep, and so when we build footings for buildings, they don't have to be dug very deep. Often you can go 18 inches beneath the soil and pour a pretty reasonable footing for a home. But when you start talking about building huge buildings, if you have lived in the city or you've worked in the city and you watch them build a skyscraper, a 20, 30, 40 floor tower, you notice that they dig down very deeply. And they put in all this shoring and pinning, and then down below what you probably don't see is that they have to dig deep within the earth and put concrete pylons and other structural members, and then they build it back from the ground up. What Paul is telling us in this letter to the Corinthians and in these first few chapters is that what we have to keep in mind is that the church is built in the same exact way. The only difference is that instead of concrete and steel, the foundation of the church is built on Christ. The foundation of the church is built on the cross. And that if we're going to build a strong and healthy church, that we have to keep that in mind. We have to know that Christ is the foundation. Now the challenge is that often, whether individually or collectively, we tend to want to build on our own. You know, going back to the Lego metaphor, one of the things that Lego kits come from are just these just green plastic bases. And then you have, three what do they call them? I forget what it's called. The bricks that have 3 dots on them and 4 dots and 2 and double thickness and, ma'am? No, they're called, I forget the term that Lego uses. It's not peg, I could call it and all of a sudden it's gone, but it's the little dots on top, and they all hold together. And over time, obviously, Lego Company has introduced more and more different kind of pieces, but there are these basic building blocks with which you build Lego kits. I think they're called lugs, maybe. Maybe that's what it is. I can't remember. But they all fit together, and you can build the most incredible things. But you have to start with what you have. Each Sunday morning in my prayer, I talk about the fact that God created us and all that is around us. And so the very basis of our existence, the very basic building blocks of who we are, all came from God. And it's the same with the church. And so as we think about building a strong foundation in the church, these are all things that are intuitive and most of us know or can come pretty naturally to us. There are some things that Christ was clear about, and we talk about them a lot. First and foremost, the basis of Christ in the image of the cross is love. That if our foundation isn't built in and with love, then it's not a foundation built in and of Christ. And that foundation has to be solid. And it has to be as close as is humanly possible to the type of love that Jesus taught of. And we've talked a bit about that over time, and particularly over the past few weeks. But it's that unconditional love. It's that love that seeks to be as God has loved us. Now, as humans, we're not able to love as God loves, because God is God and Christ was perfect. But part of the Wesleyan theology, John and Charles Wesley, who were instrumental in founding what we now call the United Methodist Church, one of the things that they talked about was going on to perfection, sanctification, the process of being made perfect in God's love. And that is the journey that each of us are on, is hoping that sometime in this life, one day we wake up and we realize truly what it is to love as God loves. So this foundation is built on a solid foundation of love. Now, one of the things that I read over the past few weeks is we've been talking about some of this, was that too often we allow culture to influence the cross, when what we should be doing is allowing the cross to influence culture. We're too concerned that we find a way to make the cross palatable to folks. It's hard to get away from the challenges of the cross. There's a new movie coming out. I've seen some previews for Son of God, and obviously, if any of you saw Mel Gibson's movie on Jesus and that, which was such a very difficult one to watch, and I'm interested to see this new one that has come out. But there are some things about our faith that just doesn't fit neatly in a box. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to be willing to share that. Sometimes it's difficult. Another construction project, and I shared this with you a number of weeks ago, but it keeps still ringing in me. There's a brand new development going in near our house, and it's going to be a high-density development with condominiums. But the developers have a sign outside there that says, "Have everything, sacrifice nothing." Have everything, sacrifice nothing. I think that's a challenge, because I think too many people in our world believe that that's true, that we can have everything without sacrifice. And the fact of the matter is that maybe for many of us, and I'm among those, I've gotten a lot in my life when I didn't have to sacrifice much. But most of what I have, if not all of what I've had, has come at the sacrifice of someone. My mother, my grandparents, my spouse, my child. There are other people who have sacrificed on my behalf to make sure that I can be the person that God created to be. And ultimately, for each of us, Christ made that sacrifice on our behalf. So anything that we have, as we've already said, if we want to say we can have it all without sacrificing anything, that's just not true. Olympic athletes, we've all probably seen some part of the Olympics over the past couple weeks. I haven't watched it as much this go around as I have in the past. I don't know why. I think just the busyness of the past few weeks. But the fact of the matter is, to attain the level of excellence necessary to be an Olympic athlete requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And I'll tell you that I watch these Olympians and I watch them compete, and it just absolutely bothers me when anything short of gold is seen as a failure. These people are the very best at what they do. And they figure skating is the perfect example. Figure skaters practice hours and hours and hours a day. And they rehearse their routines hundreds, if not thousands of times. One slip, one wrong edge of the blade, one jostle on a landing can take you from gold to no medal at all. But that doesn't take away from the incredible athlete that these folks are. And I think that's another challenge that we have in our culture, is that there's this pendulum swing. And there's one end of the pendulum that says it just doesn't really matter and we're all kind of equal. And there's the other end of the pendulum that says if we don't win at all costs, then you're just losing. And as I try to live most of my life, I love this dynamic center which says that there are people that are more talented than me in a lot of ways, even in my called vocation. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't strive for excellence. And when I do and I fall short, that's okay. Because if I've done my very best and if I've used the gifts that God has put at my disposal, then I have done what God has called me to do. So Paul tries to help them understand that he planted and Apollo watered, and others will come along and will harvest. Now, Paul's interesting in that we think of Paul being a fairly humble fellow. But then when he says, according to the grace God gave to me, like a skilled master builder, there's a little false humility thrown in there, because when you really dig deeper into Paul at times is very humble, but at times Paul can be a little puffed up. And what he's saying to the church, what you need to hear Paul saying to the church is, if y'all will just listen to me, you'll get this right. Even Paul sometimes forgets, if you will just listen to the one who sent me, you'll all get this right. And anyone who has donned a robe or I've got friends who are more in contemporary churches and they have their preaching jeans. So anyone that's donned a robe or worn preaching jeans, who has stood in a pulpit or in a sanctuary or in a place of worship and has shared the good news, there's that temptation to think, if you will just listen to me, everything will be okay. I'm going to take Paul at his word, and I'm going to remind myself that if we will all just listen to the one who called each of us and sent each of us, then everything will be okay. We've rehearsed this before, but I think it's important to do again. If we really put words and reality to these words from Paul this morning, this church is a perfect example of what Paul is saying. Because in 1848, a group of people gathered and they started a congregation. And later, our first building was built. And then as we sit here this morning, the cornerstone was laid in 1903. The foundation was built out of solid Stone Mountain granite. And then the walls rose and the roof covered what once was an empty space. And it created this incredible environment. Later, the foundation was laid and other buildings were built, and where our children are cared for and where the children run, and the day school was built and the gym was added, and all of this incredible space came into being. But there were first those who laid the foundation of faith, of we're going to establish a fellowship of people who believe in Christ in the middle of the city. And then we're going to put together some resources and we're going to build a building. And then we might need a new building and we might need new space. Part of what I shared at church conference, and I want to share again this morning, and I'm so delighted that we've had such a wonderful response, is that our foundation, both as a building is solid, and our foundation as a congregation is solid. But one of the challenges we have at Atlanta First is that while the foundation of our building is still solid, there's some other things that might need a little TLC. And one of those things that has been apparent to a lot of folks is our doors. One of the first things that people see when they come into the church is that they walk through the doors. And when I tell people that I serve Atlanta First, they say, that's the church with the red doors. Of course, there's several churches with red doors up and down Peachtree and West Peachtree and North Avenue. But our doors aren't quite as bright red as they once were. They've been opening and closing for over 100 years, and people have been coming through those doors to hear the good news, and more importantly, they've gone back through those doors to take the good news to the world. And so part of what we're doing this year as we begin to build around a strong core of leadership is we are going to open new doors to the future. We're going to have our doors restored. And so the same doors that have allowed folks in for over 110 years will continue to allow a new generation of people to come into this place. And again, more importantly, be open as we go out to be the church. You know, the building, and we know this and it's cliche, and we've heard the little children talk about it, the church building is important. It is sacred. But I will tell you that what it encourages us to do, what we do within this space, is only important if it pushes us out beyond these walls to go and be the church. And so to date, we've had several gifts that have been given that have given us a great start on a fund that will allow us to restore the doors and once again have a solid foundation in bright red paint that'll welcome more and more people into the doors at 360 Peachtree Street. And over time, we will continue to build on the foundation of people and gifts. I am just, and I've said this and I want you to hear it, I am so proud to be the pastor of this church for so many reasons. Last week, in the midst of the recovering from the second ice storm, if you've got your Atlanta paper, you will notice that on the front page of the paper was an article about the picture was from the Midtown Assistance Center. Now, while it didn't mention us specifically, it said that Midtown operates in the church basement on Peachtree. We all know what church basement that is, and I look around the room and I see many of you who volunteer in that space on the first floor of our building. But on the front page of the paper that gives information to our city, there was a picture of a person who is assisting others. And that's made possible because this church creates a space for a ministry like Midtown Assistance Center to operate. That's an important part of who we are. Our day school has been featured in the paper when we didn't have real snow and they had to have a snow machine. And so these beautiful little faces, these beautiful little people who make incredible noises and sounds throughout the course of the week. And then this morning, I've been here for almost 4 years now, and I've seen pictures of when the communion rail was full of children. And when we first came, I would gather with a couple of children right here. And this is the first morning since I've been here I can remember it stretching as far as it did. Soon, hopefully, they'll be gathered in front and behind, and they'll be filling up the spaces that were once filled with children a generation ago. But all of this means that someone else laid a foundation and someone else added. And now, because someone planted and someone watered, we get to enjoy the benefits of the harvest. But what we are also called to do is plant again. And these children that we see in the years to come, they're going to be watering. And then their children will once again reap the benefits of all that God has done with this place, in this place, and through this place. Because we all know that we are God's temple, and God dwells within each and every one of us. So let's not worry about the ones that God sent, but let's focus on God, and everything will be okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.